Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on creating a multiplayer FPS in Unity. Today we're going to be expanding on our user account system. More specifically, we're going to be tying our login scene with the registration and user login together with our lobby scene with our actual game. So when the user successfully logs in, he will be taken over to the lobby scene where he can either choose to create or host or join a game, or he can log back out, in which case he will be taken back into the login registration scene. And we will also have a look at storing the username of the player and displaying that on the screen. So that's what we are going to be doing today, and without further ado, let's delve right into it. So you can see that I'm here in Unity, and what I want to do is just begin by going on the canvas background here and removing the source image just to get rid of those corners there. I didn't notice them when first creating the UI. So if we take a look at our menu control object here, this video is going to be super script heavy because we're going to be editing this and creating another script at the same time. So hang in there. So what I want to do is I want to kind of rename this to something like login menu. And I want to edit this script quite a bit. Actually, what I want to do is I want to edit it so much that I think it would be a good idea for us to make a copy of it just to preserve the original to use as reference. So let's go down here and find the DC demo menu control C# script, and let's press Control D or Command D if you're on the Mac, and let's rename this one to our login menu, and you should put that in one word. Let's drag it out from that folder. Oh, not the entire data folder here, the login menu. There we go. And let's just see the data resources here. I dragged that out as well. That needs to be, I believe, under the database control there. I think that will be fine. Okay, so now we need to double click on this login menu to open it up in Visual Studio, and we're going to be editing this quite a lot. We're going to be extracting some of the code into another script, and we're also going to be removing some code and adding a tiny bit of code in here as well. So the first thing that we want to do is edit the class name to match the name that we just made for our script, which is login menu. Like that. And then basically I want to take anything that has to do with the logged in object here and completely remove that, because we are not going to have a logged in screen. As soon as we're logged in, we're going to transition to the lobby menu and we're going to show any GUI there. So I'm just going to disable that from the scene in here, and I'm going to keep it because we'll be using it in a moment to copy it over to the lobby scene. But I want to take anything here related to the data object here, which is when we are logged in, and simply remove it. So we'll remove that. We will remove those are fine. This is fine. We'll move all of the possibilities to send and receive data. We're going to have that in a separate script in a whole other way. So let's remove that input field there. Let's remove the send data error or text object, and let's also logged in username and data text. Let's remove these as well because they are used to change the UI when we are logged in. The part we'll leave in here, and the logged in username and password we are going to copy into another script. And I actually want to start creating that script right away so we can start moving things over to that. So my idea is that we have our login menu in the login scene, and that controls all of the UI and the actual logging in. And then we'll have some kind of script called user account manager, which will simply have a login and logout feature, and that will just keep track of whether or not we're logged in, what the username and password of the user logged in is, and then it will be in charge of sending and receiving data for that user. And we'll have that be part of every scene, or at least we will have it be part of our login scene, and then not destroy when we transition to other scenes so that they can use it as well. So let's go ahead and create that right away. So let's create an empty game object, reset the transform, and rename this to our user account manager. And we'll just drag that to the top of the screen here, add a component called user account manager, and hit create an add on that, double click to open it up in Visual Studio. And we'll be using system.collections. We'll also be using database control. Remember to import that namespace whenever you want to communicate with database control. And we can go ahead and delete these two functions. And instead, what we will do is we will turn this into a singleton. So we'll have that kind of single instance of this running, and then other scripts can access it using that instance. So let's just go ahead and create that pattern right away. So we'll create a public static user account manager, and we'll call this instance, and then we'll have an awake function where we set instance equal to this, and we'll also make sure to flag this as don't destroy on load. So we don't want to destroy this object here on load, and that means that when we transition to a new scene, it will be transferred into that new scene. Cool, so now that we have that set up, all I want to do is just make sure that if we transition back to a scene or to another scene that also has a user account manager, we won't get two. We will have this, the first instance transferred over, and then we will remove the instance that was already in the scene. So to do this, we simply check if instance is not equal to null. Well, in that case, we want to destroy this object. So we want to call destroy on the game object, and because destroy takes a bit of time to actually process, we want to return to make sure that none of this code is called before the game object is removed. So now we've created a kind of very simple singleton pattern, and next up, we can add some elements to this. And what I wanted to add was the logged in username and the logged in password. So let's go ahead and cut out these two fields by hitting Control X and paste them in here, Control V. And we'll have this be a public static string, and it will automatically default to an empty string. So what we will do instead is we will have this be a get and then a protected set. And this means that we are able to get this value from all other scripts, but we are only able to set it from within instances of this class. So from within this class, or when it comes to protected, it means that you can also set it from classes derived from this class. So that includes inheritance. So the other one here is going to be a public static string as well. And I think we can go ahead and rename that to use a big L, just to indicate that this is a public static variable. And this is of course going to be a get protected set as well. There we go. Cool. So now that we have those two in there, we can use them. We want to preserve this. Instead of setting all these, we're just going to call the method that is set up for that, called blank arrows. And we want to simply remove this because that is no longer an object that exists. Then under part 2 here, what we're going to do is simply do nothing. In this case, we are logged in. We have already transitioned and to a new scene, hopefully. And yeah, you can of course remove the if statement if you want. I just like it being there for the cleanness. And we want to delete all of the instances where we set data object to either active or inactive. And also here we are referencing the data username text, which is no longer a thing, so we can go ahead and delete that. That is just, yeah, that's not important. And here again, if we blank the received data text, if login or register UI is being displayed, and this is no longer a thing, so we can just remove that entire if statement. And we can remove the send data error text clearing. And we are slowly getting through this. So if we call the data logout button, it goes back to showing the login UI, and it resets our username and password. And I think this is something that we should edit from within our user account manager. So what we will do here is that we will go into our user account manager and we will create a public void called Lockout. And what this will do is it will say set our logged in username to be empty, our logged in password to be empty as well, and we will have another variable in here which is also of course going to be a public static, and this is going to be a boolean. And I actually don't think I want the password to be public. I think we don't need to really get it anywhere from outside the script, so let's just keep it a private static string. And then let's not have this accessor here. I changed my mind about that, so let's just have it be like that. And then the public static bool here, which is the is logged in, we definitely want that to be an accessor. So get and protected set here. So protected set. There we go. And on the log down or log out, we can set is logged into false. So we have logged out and we are no longer logged in. Cool. And then instead of doing these two lines, we can simply call user account manager dot instance dot log out. And you can of course cache this should you want to. So I'm just going to do it the quick and easy way, which is like this. So cool. Now that we have that done, we can scroll further down, and here we set the logged in username and password to the username and password variables, and this is under the send login request. And basically what we want to do here instead, if we reach this point in code, we had a successful login. So that means that we can go into our user account manager and create a method that is very similar to this called login. And we're going to take in a string username and a string password. And we're going to set logged in username equal to username and logged in password equal to password. And then we can set is logged in equal to true. So that will make sure to set all the data up for us. And then we no longer need to do this. Instead, of course, we can just put user account manager dot instance dot log in, and then we can put our username and our password as function arguments. Cool. So that will make sure that we keep track of that data. So we can continue here and look for the errors, and if you are quick, you have noticed that Visual Studio actually marks any compiler errors over here, so we can just scroll down to that point. And here, this is under the send register request. It logs in the user as soon as the register request went through. So what we're going to do here is simply also call user account manager dot instance dot log in, so that we automatically log in after creating a user. And again, we need to input our username and password, and they are accessible to us just like before. And then down here we have two methods. We have data send data button and we have data get data button, and then we have two private method to enumerators, which is coroutines that take care of actually doing that on the server. And we are actually going to take all of these 4 functions in total and move them into our user account manager. And this is because our user account manager will persist onto the next scene. And so when we need to load our username in the lobby, or say when we are playing the game and we shoot someone and we need to set some user data that we've actually shot someone, we need that to be accessible. So we don't want this to be stuck inside the login menu. We want that to be part of the user account manager. So let's take all of these 4 functions all the way down to the bottom. Let's cut those out, Control X or Command X, and let's save that and then move over here and paste those in. And we just need to edit them a tiny bit. So first off, I kind of want to change the name here. I want this to be send data. And I don't want to check if the database is set up. Instead, I want to check if is logged in. And I don't like the syntax. I'm just going to remove that. We don't need to set the part number here because that's not really a thing. We don't want to put in logged in username. We want to put in the same thing but with a large L there, capital L. And we don't want to pass it the input data, send data text. Instead, we want to have some kind of string up here containing the data that we want to send. So we'll have that be dictated by whatever other script decides to call this function. So it will look like this. So we can pass in some data and it will send that over to the enumerator. And I think this call is not needed. That seems redundant. So let's just remove that whole if statement there. And let's move this back by selecting all of the code and hitting Shift Tab. We can move it back 1 tab space. And then we can remove both of these down here. They are not needed. And everything else looks just fine. We could go ahead and add a debug.log statement here if you want to show in the console that something happened, but I don't think that's needed for us at the moment. We might add that later. We also have a public void get data button here, and we're just going to rename that to get data. And the way that we are going to use this is we're going to go up here and add another static field, and this is going to be a public static string as well, and this is going to be the logged in data. And this is also going to be a get protected set. That just makes it very easy for us to use, and I'm actually going to move it up here. There we go. By the way, if you select the line, or if you move the cursor to some kind of line and you hold down Alt and you use the up and down arrows, you will be able to just move that line without copying it or rewriting it or anything. It's a very handy shortcut. And then if we go down here again, we want to check if is logged in and just remove that. Seems unnecessary. Let's remove the part and let's send over our logged in username and password with capital letters. Cool. And again, we can remove that entire thing. And that means that we can remove, I believe it's this one as well. Let's remove the part. And we can select all of this code here and again move it back by using Shift Tab. And I want to edit this method just a bit. What I want to do is I want to create a temporary data string here, and we want to start this off by saying error, and then I will remove all of the places where we set the data to be error, because it's an error from the beginning unless we are successful, in which case I want the data to be equal to the received data. And then at the very end of the method here, after all of the if and else statements, we can then write that our logged in data should be equal to that data variable. So in case we are unsuccessful, it's going to say error with capital letters. In case we are successful, it's going to be equal to whatever data was received from the server, so whatever we have stored on that user. Cool, and it will throw out debug.log statements along the way should something go wrong. I believe that was all we needed to do in order for this system to work behind the scenes. So let's see. And yes, we get no errors whatsoever. You might get a warning that one of the variables are not being used or something, but we are going to use all of it at a later point. So that's fine. And now we can actually remove this variable or this component. But what I would recommend you to do is bring in your login menu script and then use this to just quickly find all of the objects and then move them into the slot. Because as soon as you click on one here, it will highlight it in the scene. Just make sure you don't use the data object, but we skip to the loading object here, drag that in. Then we have the input login username. We definitely want that. The input login password goes there, register username, the register password, the confirm password, and then we have a login error and a register error. And that is all we need. And then we of course need to hook all of these buttons here up to this new login menu script, because the moment that we remove this component, that connection is lost. So we need to make sure that that is preserved by going and finding the buttons here. Let's begin with the login button. Now you can see that the onClick event is now missing an object. So we want to find our login menu, drag it in there, find the function under the login menu, and that is going to be the login button. The register button, we'll do the same thing, drag in the login menu, find the function, and that is going to be the login register button. Then we can go under our register object, find the buttons here. We'll begin with the back button, drag in login menu, go under login menu, and then choose register back button. And finally, the register button is going to be login menu register button. Okay, cool. So we made it through that, and I'm going to have a sip of water to celebrate. And I believe that was all of the buttons that we need to hook up here in order for our UI to work. There's nothing under loading, and everything under logged in will not be used in this scene. Cool. So now that that is working, what we will actually be able to do is go under our user account manager and have something happen when we log in as well as when we log out, because this will actually be working now. And I can prove this to you by throwing some debug.log statements. We are only going to be able to test whether or not the login is working yet, but you will see the logout working in a second. So user logged out, something like that. No reason for these to be capital letters. And we'll have a debug.log statement down here as well. User, and then we can give it the username. Actually, let's just say logged in as, and then username. There we go. And that should be called now. So when we hit play, and it brings up for us the login menu, and I use a test user that we created on the database in the last video. You could of course also register a new one and hit login. It will load for a moment, and then it will say logged in as test 123. And that means that now on our, if we go into the don't destroy and load scene, you can see that Unity actually moves it to a separate scene that is always loaded on top of the other ones. Under our user account manager, we're not able to actually inspect this, but this actually now has our username and password stored, as well as the ability to send and receive data from that user. So all we really need to do now is transition to the new scene. And we do this by using up here, Unity Engine dot scene management, and that means that we can simply find our login method here and call scene manager dot load scene, and then giving this either a build index or a string. In my case, I'm going to give it a string, and I'm going to make this available for inspection. So let's actually put it down here. Let's make this a public string, and we're going to call this we're going to call it lobby scene name, or maybe logged in scene and name, and that is going to be lobby for now. Just default it to that, and let's just duplicate this and have it be the logged out scene name, and that is going to be our login menu. Believe that is what it's called here, and let me just actually call this the user account menu, the user menu. Let's actually just do login menu like that, just to make it very clear that this is not login but login menu, as it looked a bit weird there. Cool. So have that be login menu, and then down here this scene that we want to load is our user or is our, what did we call it? I forgot. Logged in scene. So our logged in scene name, and we can duplicate this and reuse it up here to transition to our logged out scene name. There we go. And if we view our user account manager here, we should see two fields pop up here, the lobby and login menu. Also make sure if you go to edit or file, build settings, that you have all of your three scenes in here, and you definitely want to put the login menu first, then have the lobby, and then have whatever a level that you have you're working on. If you have multiple, have them appear after all of the other ones. Cool. So now when we hit play, we should see this working. So let's do test 1 2 3, test 1 2 3, and hit login, and it should transition us to our logged or our lobby scene. And you can see that our user account manager is indeed still here. So now let's just very quickly have a look at how to display some of this information on the lobby. So let's create under our canvas here, let's bring in some of the UI from our login menu. So let's take our logged in object here again, cut that out. So let's copy it, delete it, save that, move to the lobby scene, go into canvas, paste it in there or drag it in here if it doesn't paste. And let's re-enable it, focus in on it. Let's delete all of the stuff that we have disabled. Let's actually make a new empty game object and put it down here in the corner and make sure it's anchored to the corner. And let's drag that out a bit, make it a bit larger. And let's take all of, make sure it's not parented to the logged in object. Let's take all of these elements, move them under game object, and let's delete the old logged in object. And let's now rename this to something like user. And we can take all of these now and center them by going up here, hitting Alt and hitting center on that user object here. Actually, I might want them to be centered to the top here. So let's do that instead. And let's go in here and actually drag down or find our log out button here and drag that down a bit. Let's also select our username text and change the font size here to something like 14. Have our logged in text be a font size of maybe 12. And let's just move these over to position them correctly here. So let's move that over there and that over there. Let's resize them and make sure that this is centered on the horizontal or the vertical axis. And now let's just create a bit of a gap between the two, and that should actually look fairly decent here. So if we check pixel perfect here, that will just make the text look a bit more crisp. Cool. And in the scene view, actually I want to bring up the sign out button just a bit. Something like that is pretty cool. And now we can just take this and move it down. Something like there. And just have it be, well, right at the edge of our screen here in the corner. And I think that looks pretty cool. And then we will have this be populated using our user account manager. So let's create a script that will manage this area down here. So this is going to be our, and we can call this our user account and then lobby underscore lobby to make it clear that this is what handles our user account when we are in the lobby scene. And you could actually do the same with the login menu here. You could call that user account underscore login. Or whatever you want to do. I like to name in this way, just make sure you're consistent, maybe a bit more than I am being here, but change that on your own if you feel like it. I don't think our login menu is that bad, especially because it's the entire manager of that scene, and that is what we have called the scene. So That's all right. Okay, so we are going to not be using system.collections, but we are, however, going to be using Unity engine.ui. We are going to be referencing a text object, and let's make that reference right away. So this is going to be a public text, and we're going to call it our username text. And then when we load the scene, which means in the start method, right away, we will call the start method, and we will set username text equal to user account manager dot, and then we will go use logged in username. However, we only want to do this in the case that we are actually logged in, because you can imagine that we go directly in here, and now we will get an error, of course. We go directly in here and hit play just when testing. The user is never going to do this, but we might do this a bunch of times. We don't want this to throw an error or be weird or anything. We just want nothing to happen. So let's just put in an if statement here saying that we only want to do this if our user account manager has a logged in variable that is true. So we only want to do that if we are logged in. Cool. And in our case, it wouldn't throw an error or anything. It would just have the username text display whatever the user logged in username defaults to, which is just nothing. So it will just make the text object disappear on the screen, and that is fine. However, I think this is a lot cleaner way of doing it. It just makes more sense putting in a check like this to only display our username if we are logged in. Cool. And the other thing that we want to do is put in a public function here that we can call from the button in order to sign out. So let's have a sign out here, and let's and we should maybe call this logout just to be consistent with our terminology. And what we will do here is we will go user account manager.instance.logout. And again, we only want to do this if user account manager is logged in, and that is super important here, or it might, let's see what we're doing here, actually won't throw an error at all. But again, it's cleaner. I like it. So let's do that. Cool. And that is pretty much it. Now we can go ahead and hit play, and we should see, oh, of course we need to reference this with the button. So of course we need to drag in our username text, and we need to also go to a logout button, add an on-click event, drag in our user object, and go user account lobby and go logout. There we go. So now when we hit play here, nothing should happen. You can see logged in as username, sign out doesn't work. However, if we were to go and begin at our login menu, hit play, and actually log in here, just like the user would, hit login, we're transferred over to a lobby scene. It says logged in as test123, and we are able to sign back out by simply hitting that button, and we're taken back to the login screen. So that was pretty much all I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you think it's as exciting as I do. I think we've gotten really far in a fairly short amount of time. I know that this video was probably fairly crazy and things. It's always hard to edit other people's scripts, but I think it was a bit too much code for us to write on our own, and I really like some of the things that he's done with this database control. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't have anything more to add. So thanks for watching. If you want to see more of this stuff, go and find me on my Patreon page and donate there. It really helps out a lot. We are aiming to get more videos out and maybe some live streams. That would be so cool. So without further ado, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much to all of the awesome Patreon supporters who donated in July, and a special thanks to Vixian, Fimazone, Andrew K, and Lux Game TV. These videos wouldn't be possible without you.